Welcome to Eyewitness News. My name is Tsidi Madia. We are in conversation with Limpopo's secretary, the ANC Limpopo secretary, Soviet Lekganyane. We're going to speak to him about some of the things we've been hearing around the ANC in Limpopo. There might be some developments, so let's find out. I do know that they need to find a replacement for Thembi Nkadimeng as mayor of Limpopo. Ndata Lekganyane, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, Tsidi. Good afternoon to you and your listeners.
My first question is Danny Msiza suspended from the ANC, or is he still a member as we speak?
No, he is not suspended.
Why has he not been suspended?
You must remember that the National Executive Committee of the ANC has taken a decision in March this year that all members of the African National Congress who are criminally indicted should voluntarily step aside from their positions. And subsequent to that, there were terms and conditions that were adopted by the National Executive Committee. Once a member steps aside, the leadership of the province will then inform him or her about the terms and conditions of step aside. And so in our case here, you would remember that Comrade Danny Msiza had stepped aside before, directed by the National Executive Committee of the ANC. And when we gave a report to the Provincial Executive Committee about the decision that was taken for comrades to step aside, the PEC requested the NEC to consider that the comrade had stepped aside before for almost 2 years. And then that submission was made to the National Executive Committee. And the National Executive Committee decided that all comrades who have been criminally indicted should step aside, and that the step aside guidelines should be implemented consistently across all the provinces without any deviation. So on Monday, the 16th of August, the Provincial Executive Committee of Limpopo received a letter from the SGO. The letter was informing us that, in fact, it was an instruction to the PEC that the National Executive Committee has decided that there was not going to be any special dispensation for any member of the ANC. The step aside must be implemented consistently. And I took the letter and wrote a covering letter to Comrade Danny Msiza to inform him formally about the communique that we received from the SGO. And so we were meeting today. We had a meeting of the PwC and the officials, and the PEC. So Comrade Danny Msiza was not present in that meeting. And the provincial chairperson gave us a report that he is in possession of a copy of a letter where Comrade Danny Msiza is offering to voluntarily step aside in compliance with the decision of the NEC. So when we meet in our officials meeting next week, Monday, we assume that by that time, the letter would have reached the office of the provincial secretary, and then it will be an item so that the office of the provincial secretary is able to formally write back to him to inform him about the terms and conditions of step aside. The terms and conditions of step aside have been decided at the National Executive Committee. We're not going to generate new terms and conditions. They are there. It's just to formalize it in meetings of the ANC. You remember that the provincial secretary cannot just write to him and inform him about the terms and conditions. The procedure is that the report must go to the PwC or the PEC. The PwC or the PEC are the structures in the province that can direct the provincial secretary to write back to him to inform him about the terms and conditions.
Soviet, why did it take so long? Because you can make an argument that there was the issue of him having stepped aside previously, but even to resolve that, surely Limpopo should have acted when all the other provinces were raising questions around step aside.
Yes, I think I have given you a background why there were these delays in the implementation, because I say to you that the provincial chairperson and provincial secretary sit in the National Executive Committee of the ANC. And when they come back to the province to give a report that these are the decisions that the NEC has made, the PEC instructed the provincial secretary to write back to the NEC to say, can you please consider that the comrade has stepped aside before? And that is what we were doing throughout until on Monday this week, when we received a very clearly written letter that indicates that the step aside guidelines are going to be implemented consistently without any deviation, and that the leadership of the ANC will not be meeting with provinces to deal with individual cases of members.
But here's where I'm struggling, where Limpopo seems to have wanted to make itself an exception. Those issues couldn't have taken this many months. The most senior and the Secretary General of the ANC was long forced to step aside, and he also sought consultation. He went back and forth. Provinces, the questions you said you were asking, the back and forth, other provinces were doing that. And they then reached conclusions and dealt with their issue. It almost sounds like Limpopo did want the NEC to deal with it as an individual province. Yet, from the very beginning, we've all known that the ANC said, as the national body, we will deal with those in the NEC. Provinces deal with your people. It still doesn't necessarily explain why it's taken this long. That's what I'm struggling with.
Yes, I have been as transparent as possible, and I can see you demand that I must now be naked. I'm talking to you as the provincial secretary. I communicate the decisions of the collective to say all those reports that you talk about, we have given the reports to the collective. And the collective says, Soviet, we hear your report. Can you please write to the National Executive Committee and say, can you consider that the comrade has stepped aside before? Don't you think that this constitutes a double jeopardy on the part of the member if he was going to step aside for the second time? And that was the wisdom of the PEC. And as the secretary, I communicate decisions of the PEC, whether to the public or to the National Executive Committee or to structures at sub-provincial level. It's my work to write those letters on behalf of the PEC. That is why even now I say to you, when we have received that letter from the SGO and the comrade having subsequently offered to step aside, I can't sit here in my office and impose terms and conditions on him. I have a copy of the terms and conditions, but it must still be an instruction of the PwC that now that we have a letter, please write to him and inform him about the terms and conditions. That is the procedure which is outlined in the step aside guidelines, and we must not even do anything wrong because we may end up jeopardizing the process. I understand that there are comrades, including in my province, who have stepped aside without any qualm in adherence to the decisions of the National Executive Committee. I think what we should do is to apologize to the leadership of the ANC and members of the ANC in general, especially those who find themselves in the same position, who were affected by the court cases that they have, that it has taken us so long as the Provincial Executive Committee to execute the matter in the manner we did.
All right. In terms of going forward, without a Danny Msiza there, I mean, you've obviously had this experience What are your expectations in terms of the running of the organization without the treasurer? He is often said to be an important player, said to be quite powerful. What is the vision going forward? He has been suspended before, but it wasn't as protected a time as what it might be now, because there's no telling how long the VBS matter might be in the courts.
Look, we will always want to have a full complement of all ANC leaders, but you will understand that if individual members of the ANC are facing personal circumstances, we have said that we will always want to separate the personal circumstances of an individual from the organization, and we hope we will learn from other provinces. The comrades in Mpumalanga, since 2017, when their provincial chairperson, Comrade Didi Mabuza, was elected the deputy president of the ANC, and comrades who were in the top 5, their provincial secretary became the acting chairperson. And they have been operating being 2 or 3 in the officials. You remember we had the situation of Marius Fransman in the Western Cape, where he could not be able to execute his responsibilities. We had the situation of Comrade John Block, Comrade Mabuya Kulu in KZN. Look, we subscribe to collective leadership. The comrades that remain in the collective, painful as the decisions may have to be implemented, the organization must run. In any event, this organization does not have its origin from one individual member. It is the people's organization. And those that are there in the leadership are the ones that must propel it forward.